My mom, when I was younger, started reading me the story of the little engine that could. The big train that has all the toys and dolls to take over the mountain breaks down. The little blue engine is in the yard, and there's a passenger train, and the big engine says, "Can you help me take my dolls and toys across the mountain?" No, the passenger train says, "I'm too important for that." Then the locomotive comes by. "Oh no, I'm too busy. I have other important things to do." Blah, blah. All these other engines won't help. But the little blue engine says, "I'll help." And so it goes up the hill, and it's a really heavy load, and it's really hard for the little blue engine, but it says, "I think I can, think I can, think I can," all the way up the mountain until it delivers the goods. And then it says, "I thought I could." So when I would confront a scary situation that I didn't want to do, and I was really scared, my mom would say, "Think of the little blue engine," and say, "I think I can." And so that was my first lesson in mindset work. And I still use that to this day.
You know the song Purple Rain. It was the summer I graduated from high school when that song came out in 1984. I went off to college and that song was everywhere. People just went crazy over it. It was on MTV constantly and it had people captivated. There was Prince with his purple and his fancy suits and his beautiful girls on the back of his motorcycle, but I just didn't get it. I didn't see Prince as anything special. People would call him a genius, and I just didn't see the appeal. I was not a Prince fan until many years later, in my 40s, when a friend invited me to see Prince at Madison Square Garden. I thought, why not? I've never seen him. He's supposed to be fantastic. I'm going to go. Well, I cannot describe the energy that I felt in that stadium. Madison Square Garden is huge, but I felt like I was in an intimate concert with Prince. Like it was just him and me, like he was looking at me, peering into my soul. The vibration in that place was so incredible. It was love. It was positivity. It was sex. It was life itself. And it was palpable. You could feel it. It was absolutely crazy. I never liked Prince and I never expected to feel that kind of a sensation, but I did. And it changed me. It made me aware that that kind of energy exists. And it only exists when you get into a room like that. You must put yourself into that place to feel that kind of energy. Live events change lives. And I want you to experience this kind of feeling. Everyone should experience this. Everybody should know this is what happens because it's life-changing. The best thing I did for myself as an entrepreneur is to get myself to live events. The people you meet, igniting the spark within you, that's the only way to light it up is by being in the room. It's that one thing that's going to push you to the next level in your life. You can't do it yourself. A live event with motivational speakers is the kind of thing that changes the game entirely. So you are invited to this kind of an experience. It's not Prince, unfortunately, and thank goodness I got to see him before he passed away, but you're invited to something really special. I want you to join me and a phenomenal group of speakers for the Rich Thinking Conference live in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania on September 6, 2024. It's coming up. Get your tickets now before we sell out. They are going fast, but there is still time for you to save your spot at richthinking.org or just message me at Mitzi Ann Campbell on Instagram. I will take care of you. I would love to see you there. Welcome back to Blessings, my friends. Today, I'm here with a woman with a grand and compassionate mission to heal the world. Karen Hall believes that we all have a hero that lives within us, and it's her calling to help us to awaken that hero so we can live our best lives. Through public speaking, faith-based coaching, and her podcast, The Hero Within, she helps people to tap into their inner wisdom and connect to the stories of those who have found the keys to success and empowerment. She's kind, thoughtful, and joyous, and I'm so pleased to have her with us here today to spread the light. Welcome, Karen, to the show.
Oh, thank you, Mitzi. You just make me feel so good. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here with you.
Oh, you're already happy. And just seeing your smile grow a little bit wider is very beautiful. All All right, I'm going to start out with kind of a big question here it'll get you to tap into a little bit of your past as well. What is something that you used to believe that you no longer believe?
I used to believe that I was not a good speaker and that people really didn't want to hear my voice. And when I was younger, I was terrified to speak. And I read recently a statistic that people are more afraid of public speaking than dying. And that was me. I wasn't afraid of death, but I was terrified to speak in front of people. My voice would shake. I'd turn bright red. I would sweat. I was a mess. And knowing that all of those things were happening, I was so embarrassed about my voice and how I looked and sounded. And I just would not want to speak. I was very happy to be in the back. And even when I heard myself on a tape recorder, I didn't like the sound of my voice at all. And so it was interesting because I do love to listen to people, but I also love to talk. And so in one-on-one settings, I don't have a problem at all, and small groups or whatever. But when you put me in front of people, that was terrifying. And so my mom said, you need to take a public speaking class. And why don't you start with taking a drama class? And I'm like, drama? Are you kidding me? I don't want to be on this stage. And she said, no, I think you should. So I first took a drama class and I realized I liked it, but I didn't like memorizing all the lines and all that kind of thing. So then I took a public speaking class in college. And when the audience it was connecting with me, I had so much fun. I was like, oh my gosh, they related to that. But it didn't happen overnight. I still was very scared. And when I would talk in front of big groups, I wear glasses, and contacts, but I wouldn't wear either one when I spoke, because if I looked at the audience and somebody was like this, it would affect me because I'm an empath, and I would think, oh, they don't like it. They could have been tired and sleepy that day with all the people. But even if I saw just one person do that, so then that was another thing I had to overcome, was it doesn't mean anything about me. It just means something's going on with them. Talk to the people that are awake. And
Yes.
So I remember I volunteered. I applied to speak. This was now after I've been in my career. I applied to speak at a conference, a professional conference. And my peers were like, you're kidding. You volunteered to do that? And I'm like, yeah, I'm speaking now. And when I got up to the podium, I had followed all these doctors, and they had really tiny print slides that you couldn't even read all the statistics on it. It was just so boring. And everybody's head was down. And my husband came with me to cheer me on in the back. And so I got up to speak. And as soon as I started speaking, their heads just all popped up. I didn't have a joke or anything, but I just told something that was funny spontaneously. And that was so fun for me. It was just like watching flowers in the sun, except it was really quick, but they all popped up. And I was like, I like this.
Oh my gosh. That's so beautiful. So it was almost like a little journey for your own blooming in that process.
It totally was.
That's beautiful. All right. Thank you for sharing that, because now you are doing all kinds of speaking and in front of lots of people, and the audiences are still really resonating with you. How does that feel now?
Oh, it feels even better now, because now I speak about things that are dear to my heart, about things that I've overcome, or stories of other people that have overcome things. And I feel like if I can help one other person to not suffer like I have, then I feel like my suffering's not in vain. And that if I can help, like when you're going down a road and somebody warned you, oh, there's a sign, there's a pothole or whatever. I'm so grateful for those tips that helped me on my journey. And so now that's why I have my podcast, The Hero Within, because I want to help other people on their journeys. And my guests have so many amazing tips from their experiences. We all do, from all our experiences. It really does fill me with joy. It doesn't just make me happy. It just makes me full of joy to have those opportunities to share that anything that I've gone through is of value to someone. Just makes me feel so good.
Yeah. Being heard is something we really all need.
Yes.
It's one of those basic needs. So, what is something in your life that you have overcome? What is a sample of a story that you might share on the stage?
Yeah, so one of my stories that I share is about overcoming fear because I've had a lot of fear in my life. I was born 2.5 months premature, and I weighed at 1 pound 13 ounces shortly after birth, about the size of a grapefruit. If you think about the weight, and uh,
Wow.
and the doctors told my mom and dad that I would die, and they were so scared. This brand new little baby that was just so tiny, and then when I lived, they said she'll be a vegetable. And spoiler alert, I'm not. But that 2.5 months in those days, the mother wasn't allowed to hold the baby. She couldn't feed me or do anything. And so I was all alone during that time. And now we know that babies need to be held. It's not just their physical needs. They can die if they're not held. And so I'm sure it took its toll on me, but I came away from that with some anxiety. When I was a little girl, I was always scared. Like when I would go to a new school, we moved when I think I was about 6. And so I had to go to the new school to see how it looked and walk around and see everything before I went in because I was scared. And so my mom, when I was younger, started reading me the story of the little engine that could. And I don't know if you've heard that story. Are you familiar with that
Yes,
story?
I know that one. It's
Little
so
blue
good.
Yeah, the little blue engine was coming along, and the big train that has all the toys and dolls to take over the mountain breaks down. For anybody who hasn't heard, I'll just give you a brief little synopsis. But anyway, so the little blue engine is in the yard, and there's a passenger train, and the big engine says, "Can you help me take my dolls and toys across the mountain?" No, the passenger train says, "I'm too important for that." Then the locomotive comes by. "Oh no, I'm too busy. I have other important things to do." Blah blah. All these other engines won't help, but the little blue engine says, "I'll help." And so it goes up the hill, and it's a really heavy load, and it's really hard for the little blue engine, but it says, "I think I can, I think I can, I think I can," all the way up the mountain until it delivers the goods. And then it says, "I thought I could. I thought I could." So when I would confront a scary situation that I didn't want to do, and I was really scared, my mom would say, "Think of the little blue engine and say, 'I think I can.'" And so that was my first lesson in mindset work. And I still use that to this day when I am getting on the steps to go somewhere, or if I'm starting to do something that is scary. I use that mantra to this day. And afterward, I celebrate that I did it. And I say, "I thought I could. I thought I could."
My goodness. That is so cool because we all have those connections to childhood stories, and whether it's a fairy tale or a nursery rhyme or an actual book. And I too can remember books, and I actually have books. I have many of those books that my mother read to me, and they make an impact. It strikes me the messaging of empowerment, not only just you obviously had an amazing mom, but the idea that books and the importance of what they tell us and what messages they send us, even from being a child, is
Mhm.
amazing. It's so amazing that sticks with you and you use that. And those classic books, like that's a classic. I hope people today who are raising little ones are going in and finding those classic books because they are classics for a reason. They have an impact to make.
And it's so interesting because that is one of my favorite books. And the other day I have bookshelves on both sides of my hallway line, all the way to the ceiling. And when people see that, and then I have them in my bedroom, I have them in my office, I have bookshelves everywhere. I love books. And so people see that, they're like, "How many books does one person need?" Especially my husband. When Amazon comes, "You got a package? What'd you get?" "Oh, another book?" And I'm like, "Yes, another book." When you were reading the Carol Dweck's book,
Yes.
I remember thinking about that growth mindset. And that started when I was just very small. I don't know exactly when my mom first read it to me, but I can remember age 3, her reading that. So I'm sure she started younger, but I wouldn't have that growth mindset if I hadn't gotten that message so young. And I needed that message because
Mhm.
it was a traumatic experience for me to overcome that trauma. And I still default to fear at times when I'm facing something. And so I still use that mindset.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. And so where were you born?
I was born in Sacramento, California.
Oh, California baby.
Yes, I was raised in
Okay.
California.
And then would you say that reading those books was one of your earliest memories? Do you have any other super early memories of other empowering or even disempowering stories that you might want to share?
Yeah, another empowering thing is my dad. My dad's a psychologist, and my mom was always trying to study about how to be a better mom and how to be the best. They both had traumatic experiences in their lives with their parents, so they wanted to overcome the things that they had gone through to be the very best that they could. And my dad is an empath also and very sensitive. And so he would often point out things about me, about my gifts. My mom didn't quite understand my sensitivity. She was worried about me because I got my feelings hurt easily and misinterpreted things. And so she was trying to help me to not get my feelings hurt. But she was annoyed by it. She would just be like, oh, you are so sensitive. And that was really painful for me to hear as a child because I misinterpreted it. I thought something was wrong with me because other people didn't get their feelings hurt like I did. And when they did, it didn't last as long and they didn't seem to feel it as deeply as I did. And it took me a lot of work when I got my feelings hurt to get centered again and to understand what was going on. I was always like, why would somebody say something like that, or do something like that? It just baffled me. And my dad would say it was interesting because he didn't use the word sensitive. So for many years, I didn't attach this to it. But he would often point out when I picked up on things in people, he would say, you noticed that so early. You picked up, you saw that need. You could understand how that person felt. And so he was always telling me, you have a gift. But I didn't connect the two as flip sides of the same thing until after I was married. And I remember in marriage trying to understand my spouse. We were very different also. And he worked on a cattle ranch. And so he was always swearing. My family never sweared. And so when he swore at me, I was just stunned. Like, how could he say that? I know this is funny because people swear a lot nowadays, but I didn't hear swearing growing up. So for me, it was like, he must hate me to swear at me. And so I remember I totally misinterpreted that. And so one day I was thinking about my sensitivity and I was feeling shame. I just felt so much shame. I thought, like, why can't I just snap my fingers and be over it and just let it go? When Elsa came out, let it go. I thought, oh my goodness, that's been my theme song my whole life. And so I felt shame about who I was. I felt shame about my personality. And then one day I was thinking about my dad and I thought, oh, my dad was trying to tell me that I have a gift in how I can use my sensitivity in connecting with people and even helping people. Like a lot of times when I was in the medical field, the doctors would ask me to go and meet with somebody because they said, you can connect with people that are very difficult and we need your help to soothe this person, to help de-escalate their emotions. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. They saw that. And then I realized I can do that for myself. I can help myself learn to emotionally regulate my emotions. And that was huge for me. But it came because my dad gave me that empowering thought that I had the ability to do that. Not just that it was something that I could learn, but that was true too. And he would often tell me, you can learn anything because you're so smart. And he would call me Miss America. He would say, you are Miss America and you can do anything you want to do. And I was just, wow. And so overcoming my fear, my trauma, and my shame, I needed that message so much in my life. And I forgot it. When I became emotionally dysregulated, everything that I'd ever learned flew out the window. And I couldn't remember anything good about myself at all. I was just stuck in shame and feeling badly about myself. And then I had to learn these tools to emotionally de-escalate and to regulate my nervous system because I feel things so deeply and intensely. And then when I learned those tools, then I was able to get back to the truth about myself and to reframe things and to then look at it differently. And then I was to move forward.
Wow. I can relate to that very strongly. I am also an empath and also very highly sensitive and also get hurt very easily and it lasts a long time. Even today, I can tell you stories from recently in my life where I've had my feelings hurt. And I too understand now that my sensitivity is a strength and not a weakness at all. And although it is difficult at times as a highly sensitive person, we can connect with other people very easily. And sometimes that's to our detriment. But I'm always grateful for that gift as well, because I would much rather be able to connect, and even if it's at the cost of risking my heart, which is maybe something that is a little more risky than someone who isn't so sensitive. But on the other hand, the rewards are very great.
I remember I had a quote on my wall growing up, and it said, better to have loved and lost than to have never loved at all. And that described me so much because, and I had many people tell me, you love way too easily. You need to not love so much. And I was like, what? I just couldn't understand that. I go to the grocery store and I see a little grandma and I hug her sometimes because sometimes they're just so cute. Or I'll see a little couple holding hands walking along. I recently saw a couple, they were in their 90s and they were just shuffling along at a university. And I saw them and I had to run up and catch them and just say, oh, I just love how you just love each other and you're holding hands. And they told me the cutest stories about their life. They'd been married, I don't know, 70 years, 75 years or something. And he said, my day's not complete unless she's there with me. And I went, are you ready to go? Not yet, not until she's with me. It was just so cute. And I love that. It just enriches my life so much to build those connections, even if it's brief, even if it's fleeting. Like I love to thank the pilot when I get off the plane. My son's a pilot, and I love to thank the pilot for the safe flight because I am so grateful we landed. I've been on some flights in different countries where they were a little rough and it was a little scary. And I remember the first time I was in Peru, and I remember the first time we landed, it was really rough landing. And then all the passengers clapped and cheered. I was like, I've never been so grateful. I should be more grateful every time that plane lands.
Yes. I love the way that you notice these things. And that's part of your sensitivity. But imagine that there are people who don't notice these things. They don't notice the little things that bring so much joy into your heart, and you do. So I love that about you. It's a wonderful thing.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh. Now, you just mentioned a couple of minutes ago that there were tools you use to regulate your nervous system. Can you give us one or two of those?
Yes. So I'll tell you a little bit about the stages that I go through in case any of your people have this happen. As I mentioned, the first thing is I'm stunned. I'm like, whoa. And I say in my mind, what just happened? Because I'm baffled. That's my first emotion, is I'm baffled by what happened.
So if something difficult or hurtful happens to you, if someone says something to you that is hurtful, or if you're in a situation that's like suddenly, this is happening. Okay.
Yeah. And say somebody spoke harshly to me and just said, I don't know, I'll just make something up. Like, I don't care. I don't care. And I'm like, whoa, they don't care about me. Why would they say that? What's going on here? And sometimes things happen out of the blue where things are just going along and it just is unexpected. Like I just walk into a situation or somebody just walks into my circle or something. So that's my first reaction. And then I'm curious. I'm like, wait, why would they do that? And a lot of times I have no idea, because sometimes I don't know the person. Sometimes I don't know what's gone on with their life or whatever. And so that's the first thing that happens. But when my emotions are escalated, that's about as far as I get. That neural pathway is so ingrained. That one always happens. And then I try to figure things out and I'm just stuck because I'm not in my prefrontal cortex. I'm over here in the primitive part of my brain where I'm feeling fear because maybe they don't love me. Maybe they don't care about me. I start to feel my emotions escalate, and sometimes I feel it within my body. Sometimes if somebody yells at me, I feel like an electric current just goes from my head down to my toes. It's not just like I hear the yelling, I feel the yelling in my actual physical body. And so I have to pause and I have to step back. Sometimes I have to go into excuse me, I got to go to the bathroom or something. I have to pause, and I can't always, like if I'm in a car, sometimes I can't step away, but I just pause within myself for a minute and I take a deep breath. Breath is always very helpful for me, but I've learned some interesting things about breath. They used to say count to 10. So I'd take breath, count to 10 while I was breathing and exhale. And then we learned about deep breathing and deep exhaling. And then when I learned that is what we do when we are naturally feeling safe and relaxed, like right before a baby goes to sleep, they let out a big sigh. Or when I've noticed my dog would do that, it'd go round and round till it finally got comfortable. And then it'd lay down and then have this big heavy sigh. And then I realized, oh, someone taught me that's sending a message to my brain to mimic being safe. And so my brain thinks that it's safe. And so my heart rate starts to slow down. My muscles start to relax a little bit. And it's a little bit at a time. It's not like, I'm all totally safe and I feel fine. But that's the next step, is the breathing. And then I learned that if you breathe and you inhale and hold it, and then exhale and exhale deeply, that's another message to your brain. And then if you exhale loudly, like that. And I remember the first time someone recommended that I do that, I felt like I was in a haunted house or something. And I was at a breathwork meeting and everybody's doing this. And it just made me laugh. It really made me laugh. It was so funny to hear these loud sounds. And then I learned that the reason for that is because it massages your vagus nerve. And that massage, so you're sending your brain the message that you're safe, then you're massaging your vagus nerve to calm it down. Oh my word, there's so many scientific, I love neuroscience. Yes. And there's so many scientific reasons why that would work. And then what I had to do was, so I'm coming down step by step. Then I had to have compassion for myself, because I would start to the time was clicking. So I was noticing that time was passing. And I'm like, hurry up, Karen, because I heard that my whole life. Aren't you over that yet? And so that's where I feel a lot of shame. And so as I recognize that shame, and I remember, and that thought probably comes up somewhere, if not consciously, subconsciously, then I have compassion for myself and I say, it's okay. You can take as long as you need. And I'll tell you what, I wish I would have heard that my whole life, but saying that to myself and providing that self-love for myself, so comforting. And many times I'll hug myself. I'll actually put my arms around my shoulders. And then I had someone teach me that's actually a scientific technique. It's called havening. And you take and you stroke your arms. And as you stroke your arms, you stimulate parts of your brain as if you are being comforted and soothed. And so as I do this for myself and I say compassionate things to myself, I start to de-escalate further until I come back to my prefrontal cortex and I can remember to think about the other person. So I'm having empathy for myself first, and then I'm able to have empathy for the other person. And then and it's so fascinating, because if I don't provide myself with empathy first of all, I feel so much shame and I'm totally stuck. And then I can't have empathy for the other person. But once I start to de-escalate to where I can come to that higher level of brain function to have empathy for the other person, I think things like, I wonder what happened before we had this interaction. I wonder what they're going through. And sometimes I'm able to verbalize that to the other person. And I remember a quote that I read when I was in college by Stephen R. Covey. And he said, seek first to understand and then to be understood. And he went on to be very successful with corporate businesses that were failing, and to figure out how to increase the success of the business. And it started with seeking to understand. So he would seek to understand what was going on in the company, and then he would help the leaders to understand the staff, and the staff to understand the leaders and each other. It was just fascinating. He would turn companies around. So when I read that quote, first of all, I did not realize the power of that quote, but I tried to live by that quote. But now in my own life, when I see, if it's you and me, and you said that to me, and I step back, now I can be curious as an observer and not make it mean something about me, and just really try to understand you and say, you know, what's going on today? How are you doing? I sense that you're maybe feeling a little stressed or something. And I actually, from my heart, truly have compassion for you and empathy for you. And I'm not just, what is going on with you? If I really care, and then you know that, and you trust me enough, then you start to tell me what's going on. And then I have understanding. And then I'm like, oh, and then it totally shifts my brain. And I'm like, oh, they just had a bad day at work and their boss treated them like crap and they feel awful. And so that didn't mean anything about me. It was directed at me, felt like it meant something about me, but it actually didn't. And so then the last bit of whatever I have felt, the shame or the hurt feelings, just evaporate. And it's so fascinating that understanding and that connection starts with me having compassion for myself, empathy for myself, and then I can give it to the other person. The other thing that I find totally amazing, it's almost like magic to me, is that person's defenses are up for whatever reason, whatever happened to them. Of course, now I'm reacting to them saying they don't care about me. And so they see that I'm so transparent. You can see everything. I think, and all my energy comes out anyway. And they see it on my face because I'm like, what? What happened? And they're operating from whatever they're dealing with. They don't mean anything about me. So then they start to react to me. And then this goes back and forth sometimes for a while until I get de-escalated. And so they start to feel like I'm attacking them, even just by my reaction. It looks like I'm mad at them now. And then they feel like they have to defend themselves. But when I first seek to understand them, they drop those defenses and they feel cared about and they feel loved. And then they're able to feel better, whatever it is, they start to de-escalate. So it's co-regulation. As I regulate my nervous system, they regulate their nervous system. And then we are able to connect and feel that love on whatever level. Even if it's a friend or an associate, we can feel good feelings between us. So for me, it's like magic, but it's not really magic. It's neuroscience, and it's the power of love. It's the power of empathy.
Wow. Thank you for taking us through that process, because I think a lot of us don't think about the individual steps that are involved in that. You're going through that a lot of times naturally if you are able to harness that feeling of being able to de-escalate, but many of us can't. In fact, I probably think most of us can't. But when you do go through the process, you don't think about all those individual steps and things that are taking place. So the way you broke it down was really helpful.
It was interesting is that I did this for many years, but I didn't know that's what I was doing because I wasn't like paying attention to it. I just
Yeah.
knew, I knew that was so common. So I had a life coach. And as I was processing different difficult conversations and difficult situations and relationships and things, she said, do you realize that you have a formula that you use every time? And I'm like, no. And she was the one that pointed out the things that I said. She said, you always say, what happened? And she said,
Mhm.
it's always curious. And anyway, it was so interesting to me because then I had the bare bones of the formula, but then I was conscious and I was like, oh, what else do I do? And what else could I do? And as I learned more neuroscience, that became a beefier formula for me. And I'm sure next year when I learn something else, it'll be even more powerful for me.
Wow. That's amazing. I love that you found out that you had to have empathy for yourself first.
Totally. And that was a big part that I was skipping for many years. Even when I read that quote, I was jumping to understanding the other person, and it wasn't as effective because I still wasn't doing that for myself. And so now I teach other people to do that. And it makes me so happy when they come back and they have those light bulb moments because they're like,
That is really wonderful. And I know you've been doing this work with people for quite some time, but when you first started out professionally, like from college, what were you studying then? Where did you said you worked in the medical field? So where did you start out and how did you make the transition into this life coaching business?
yeah. So I started with coaching with weight loss in the very beginning. And so that was when I was a senior in high school and I was helping other women with weight loss. And so I didn't know a lot at that point in time. But then when I went to college, I studied nutrition. And then I realized, oh, I just love food. And I always loved reading recipes and cooking and experimenting and figuring out how to eat healthy and lose weight, blah, blah, blah. And that's because my mom was very interested in that. So I was like her coach first. And I became interested in that was our thing that we did together. And then when in college, I became a dietitian. And as I would be in the hospitals working with people, oh, I just love them. I just love them because when they got their diagnosis, heart disease or diabetes or whatever, they were just like me. Wait, what? What just happened? They were all stunned at first and they couldn't think of anything to eat. They were like, life is over. Goodbye, happiness. it's miserable. And they were going through the grieving process, which I also was going through when I got my feelings hurt. And we didn't talk about that, but I was going through the grieving process. And so I would help them in the grieving process. And when they were ready, I would say, I have some ideas of how we could make food fun again. And they'd be like, you do? Are you kidding? I could still enjoy life. And I'm like, yes, I could teach you how to cook that would fit your diet. And they're like, really? And then I would make them food. Sometimes I did classes and I'd actually cook the food and let them taste it. And they'd be like, oh, that's really yummy. I had no idea I could still have a sugarless cake or whatever. And I continued doing a lot of health and wellness coaching, and I did that on the side. And then I did it as a volunteer because I stayed home with my kids for many years and I just loved helping people. So I would just do it that way. And then my husband said every single time, because I would come home and tell him these light bulb moments, and I'd be like, but I would just tell him how I just love them. Many times I'm hugging them. He said, what's so interesting about you is every time you coach somebody, you always talk about the relationship the most. He said, that's the thing that lights you up, because I always said, say the doctor told them they weren't supposed to eat sugar, but they kept eating sugar. I would say, why do you think that you want the sugar? What is it? Do you have some memories around sugar? And then I would talk about the relationship. Well, we're having a party. I don't want to be the only one that's standing out. And so we would always talk about relationships and about feelings.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of dietitians don't do it that way. I was very different. And sometimes people are like, do you always talk about feelings? I'm like, pretty much, because to me, food was not just nourishment. There is so much emotion attached to food, and we connect through food. And so I felt like that was the heart at what created the obstacle for the people. I had a patient one time that defied the doctor constantly. And every time we went on rounds, the doctor was just so annoyed with this patient. And this was years of dealing with this patient. And I was like, I wonder why he is so defiant about this. And I kept, every month I would talk to him, tell him the same message, ask him how he's doing, work on the relationship. That's what I worked on the most with him. He already knew all the stuff he was supposed to do. He already knew he wasn't doing what he was supposed to do. Right. So I would work on the relationship. And one day he decided that he wasn't going to do it. And the doctor came around and all his labs were just phenomenal. And I was just like, wow, look at this. And the doctor was like, mm-hmm. And I said, doctor, did you notice his labs? And he looked and he goes, oh, yeah, good. And I said, it's exciting. I grabbed the nurse and I said, let's do a happy dance. And the patient was just giggling. He was just laughing so hard. And so anyway, they passed on and they went to the next person. So I went back to him and I said, I am so proud of you. I said, I'm just so proud of you. And he said, you know what I decided? And I said, what? And he said, I want to live now. And he then had a purpose. And he told me his purpose. And I just wept. And I thought, for all those years, he didn't want to do it because he didn't want to live and he didn't feel like he was of value and he didn't find a purpose. But all of a sudden, he found one. And so it had nothing to do with the nutrients in the food.
Yeah.
So my husband said, why don't you just focus on life coaching instead of the health and wellness part of it? You could do that too if you want to, because I still loved it. But then I started focusing on the actual life coaching. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm in heaven. I am totally in heaven. And then I'm writing a book about the stories that people go through. And then I realized, oh, I could do a podcast on the same thing and I could talk about it at events. And so that's how it morphed into what I'm doing today.
Oh, what a beautiful journey. And I love the way that you come straight from the heart. I know other people who are life coaches that are doing it because they think they know better. They think they can fix someone because they know better. And that's coming from a place of taking from them, really. It's not giving. And you're coming from a place of giving.
The thing that's so interesting for me is I received so much when I helped that patient and I didn't give up on him all those years because everybody told me, why do you waste your time talking to him? He's not going to do anything. But I cared about him. I loved him. And I just kept thinking, you never know when something's going to change in somebody's mind. It's happened to me. And I thought it might happen. Today might be the day. And so I just continued on. But I received so much joy when he had that mindset shift. And it's the same thing with anybody that I talk to. When anything that we are sharing blesses either one of us, I feel joy if they're blessed, and I feel joy when I'm blessed. Sometimes they say something and it triggers a memory in me. Like you're doing that with me right now. You're triggering memories in me that are bringing me joy again. And so I relive that. And so I am so blessed. It's my greatest joy. I feel like I receive every single time, and you're giving me a gift right now.
Oh, thank you. I'm happy to do that. It just makes me wonder, you talk with so many people, and what do you see is the extent of kindness and how it exists in the world or doesn't exist? Like you're someone who you exude kindness. You're naturally kind, but there are other people who are not. But in all the people that you've been working with over the years, how strong is kindness in the world? How do you notice it? How does it show up or not show up?
Yeah, one of the things that I have noticed is there's a lot of trauma and a lot of pain in this world. And I feel like it's exponential because if a parent has trauma and they have 3 kids, all 3 of those kids experience some form of trauma because of the parent's trauma. And then those kids go on and they have 3 kids each. Then all 3 of those children, those grandchildren now, each have some intergenerational trauma. And until somebody learns these tools and can actually work on it, that trauma just continues on. And sometimes it is expounded, it gets bigger because now the person that had the trauma originally now has their parents' trauma plus their trauma that happened in their own life and with their spouse and different things. So I think that there's a lot of barriers to love. And like you said, we all have such a desire to be seen, to be heard, to be understood, and to be loved. And yet, many of us are walking around, I call it the walking wounded. Many of us are walking around. I was a walking wounded. I wasn't aware of things. I wasn't even aware that I was hurting somebody when I was stunned. When I was stunned, I didn't know that I was actually causing the other person to feel a negative emotion. And so I think there's a lot more of that. And I think it's with pandemic, I think there's a lot of social isolation. There's an epidemic of loneliness. The Surgeon General report, I'm sure you're familiar with that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there's a lot of it, but there's also an awakening that I see going on. I'm learning these tools. You're learning these tools, things that my mother didn't know and my father didn't know. They were trying to be better than what they had experienced, and they had tools. Their parents would have said, oh my heck, I would have never thought of it that way. We didn't talk about self-esteem in years past, but now we do. Now we talk about mindset. When I was growing up, even though I knew the little engine that could, my mother didn't use the word mindset. And so now I feel like with this awakening, I feel like there are people that are now having more light, and they've tapped into that hero within them. And now they're able to spread that light to other people. And one of the things that I have noticed is that when I'm interacting with these big groups, I can see, first of all, I can see the pain in people's eyes. I can feel the pain in their energy. And I have such a desire to connect with them and to give them love and to let them know that my husband says, we can't get out of Walmart in less than an hour. He said, because you have this sign on your forehead that says, tell me your life story. The cashier or whatever. I really want to ask, how are you doing? They often tell me. And then I want to know more because I care. He just laughs at me. Okay, don't go for the errand. I'll do it myself because we don't have time. But I feel like for those of us that are learning and are so blessed to have our eyes opened and our ears open and our heart open, then we have so much that we can give to those who haven't experienced that yet, who haven't felt seen and heard and understood and loved. And so I feel like there's a responsibility that the greater the light, the greater the responsibility.
Mm-hmm. I love that there is more light. That's really wonderful.
It gives me hope because I could focus on how much pain there is because I do see it, but I also see the light. And I remember somebody said one time, I can't remember if it was a talk. I think it was a talk that somebody gave. And they said, if you think about a light and just like a flicker of a match, I don't know if you've ever been in a cave where it's like totally dark. You turn the lights off and you can't see your hand in front of your face. and then they light a match. And all of a sudden you see the light and it permeates the darkness. But if you have that match or that light in a dark room, the darkness cannot extinguish the light. And I think that is fascinating. We live in a wooded area, and sometimes people have their cell phone, and I can see the little teeny tiny flicker of the cell phone light out in the trees. And I've been fascinated that darkness cannot overpower the light. That gives me so much hope, so much hope.
Oh, wow. I'm going to keep that metaphor in my mind. That is really powerful. No matter how small the light may seem, and no matter how big the darkness may seem, it can never extinguish the light. That's
Never,
beautiful. Wow.
never.
So I'm curious about the idea that you were born in this precarious position, such a tiny little baby, and that trauma that you carried from that. What do you think about the idea that you were made aware of that? What if you didn't know that had happened to you? And what about other people who may be carrying trauma that they're not aware of? What is your advice about that sort of thing? And what do you think, like in your own life, if you didn't know that was your situation, how might that change how you look at yourself?
Oh my goodness. So I didn't know I had shame. We didn't talk about shame when I was a little girl. So I didn't know I had shame. I couldn't have identified. I just knew I felt bad about myself. And I had no idea how to deal with that shame. I just honestly had no idea. And I do talk to people that have had intergenerational trauma that they don't know about for many years. And I'm sure that there's other things in my life that I still don't know about that I'm going to become more aware of because it keeps happening. I keep becoming aware of things within myself. And so when I'm talking with a client and they have no idea why they feel this feeling, sometimes they have a limiting belief. They don't even know they have a limiting belief. So one of the things that I do is to help go layer by layer, because many times they think of things on the top. And then as we get down layer by layer, they become more aware. But that awareness, I believe, is more available to us when we practice that self-love, because it's scary to become aware. It can be painful to become aware. When I recognized the shame and I was like, oh my word, I feel shame. Then I felt shame for feeling shame.
That's how it works.
And then the life coach, when I felt shame, I was like, oh, for heaven's sakes. And then I did the default. I should know better and I should be over this by now because I'm a life coach. I know all these tools. I shouldn't even experience that thing. And I was like, oh, for heaven's sakes, Karen, you're human. You're still human. And I'm still working on my wounds. And so many times the walking wounded do not know what the wounds are. And even if they do know what they are, they don't know what all of them are. And they usually don't know how it impacts them. And so that self-love, I believe, is key to becoming aware, to really having your eyes opened, because it's even scary within ourselves. Like when I started listening to my thoughts in my head, someone told me, you should, it was my best friend. And she said in college, she was into self-development. I didn't even know about personal development. And she said, listen to the thoughts in your head. And I'm like, what do you mean? And she said, just be quiet and just listen. There was something I was totally unaware of. I didn't know I was talking all the time. That there was chatterbox, just like I talk all the time. And then when I listened to it and I said things like, you should be over it by now. Why are you so sensitive? I said those things that I heard. I felt so sad. I was like, oh, I'm being so mean to myself. I need to be nicer to myself. And then when I was mean to myself and I knew I should be nicer to myself, I felt bad that I forgot. And that was another battle that I had. I still feel shame when I forget, but I've learned that's part of being emotionally dysregulated is all of us forget when we're emotionally dysregulated. And I remember I was teaching a client about this and they were like, no, I should be able to remember, blah, blah, blah. They had very high expectations. They knew the tools, but they couldn't remember it. So they were just like me. They were like, I don't understand why I can't remember. I don't know if you've ever had a situation like this, but I used to hear about people if they had a fire in their house and they called the fire department and they couldn't remember their address. I heard about that for years. And I thought, how strange that they couldn't remember their address. That's so obvious. They couldn't remember their address. Then we had a fire at our house. I couldn't remember our address either. And they're like, what's your address? And I just froze. I just stood there. My son was a teenager. He came over and saw that I was frozen. He put his arm around me and he said, what's going on? And I said, what's our address? And he told me the address. He's very common crisis, very common crisis. And I was like, wow, I couldn't even remember my address. So when somebody experiences it and then they say, oh, now I see what you're talking about. And so with that, I had the logical theory. I knew it in theory for all those years, but it didn't really make sense to me until I learned it on a personal level. And then it was like light bulbs. Oh, that's why, because I flipped my lid and I'm offline. I'm not available to tap into my prefrontal cortex. So I can't remember. It's impossible to remember.
Wow. That's a great story. Interesting that you were curious about that and then it actually happened in your own life.
Yeah, it was interesting because for years and years I'd heard that and I just thought, how could someone not remember their address?
Wow. So do you think that it's a kind of chicken egg thing with between self-love and self-awareness? Like which comes first, self-awareness or self-love?
Wow, that's a really great question. I think it is both because as I become aware of my, like somatically, I start to recognize the feelings within my body. Then I realize, oh, I need to practice self love right now because I'm starting to escalate in emotions. And even becoming aware early, that's another thing that I have learned is to be like a sniper and take out the darkness earlier so that I'm like, oh, I'm starting to feel a pit in my stomach. And I recognize it as I describe it as feeling off. I'm not as joyous and I'm not as content or I'm not as peaceful, whatever. I start to notice I'm a little off. Okay, what's going on? And I use my curiosity. Maybe somebody said something the day before that's still lingering and I'm still processing it. Or maybe I didn't process it the day before at all. I'm just doing it now. So that somatic awareness is like one of the first things that because that clues me into giving myself self-love. But I think that many times the giving myself the self-love opens myself up to even greater awareness. So maybe it starts with awareness on one level. And then as I love, I get greater awareness. And then I love myself more and I get greater awareness. So it goes back and forth.
It's a self-perpetuating circle.
It is a self-perpetuating circle. And oh, Mitzi, I have to tell you this because if this would help any of your people on blessings, I would love to share this little tip because sometimes I wish that sometimes someone will say they're sorry and they'll be like, sorry, I hurt your feelings. And it doesn't feel adequate. I'm like, I wish they would have said, I can see how you feel that way. Oh, I didn't mean it that way. And so sometimes when that has happened to me, I'll have the conversation with the other person and they're like, I said I was sorry. Isn't that good enough? My husband and I had this conversation many times. And he couldn't understand. And I said, I need to know that you understand how I feel. And he was like, I don't really. He's not as sensitive as I am in that way. He's very sensitive in different ways. But I wanted us to be on the same page and I wanted him to know how it hurt. I didn't realize that one of the reasons for that was because that built trust. Because then I thought if he really understood, then he would be more careful about not saying it in that way or doing that thing or whatever. And for many years, he did not understand that concept at all. And I could not verbalize that because I didn't understand it that way. It just felt inadequate. So I learned I would write letters to myself from him. And I would say, if he really understood me, if he really understood how I felt, what would he say? What do I wish he would say? And so then I write the little letter to myself from him as if he said it. And I knew exactly after I started writing, my awareness became more keen and I could think of things like usually I could think of one sentence. And when I wrote the one sentence, then I could think of a second sentence. And using that tool, what he did was he said, could you share that letter with me and teach me what you would like to hear? And so for many years, we called this our script. And he would say, could you please just give me a script and just tell me what I can say? And so he would say something like, I'm sorry, I can see how that would hurt your feelings, But he would say it like this: I'm sorry, I can see how that would hurt your feelings. And I would say, that was great. I thank you so much for saying that. And I'd say, could you put a little voice inflection into this? And
Little
laugh.
emotion. Oh my gosh.
So then he'd practice. This was so funny to us because he really cared. He really wanted to, but he didn't know how. He had never been taught these skills. And so we got really good at this script thing. And then he would say, because his mind was blank. He just couldn't think of anything until I gave him the script. And then after he got the hang of the script, then he would say, he would be escalated and I'd be escalated and I'd be curious and baffled. And then he would say, could you give me the cue card? I just need a cue card. And this just, now it's a big joke. We laugh so much about this process of learning this in our marriage because we both felt things strongly in different ways. And so now I teach my kids that. My kids are all married and now I have grandkids. And now I teach them about, if they don't understand, try writing it out and try writing it to you from them as if they did understand what you needed. And then when they're ready, I didn't share that when he wasn't ready, but when he was ready and wanted to know, then he accepted that. And then he built on that. And now he's amazing at validating.
Okay. I love that so much. And it's funny you bring that up because I just recently heard that same technique of writing the letter from the other person in a different context, but basically it was a little bit more spiritual context where it was like, if you want to bring something into your life, you can do this. And you're talking to source, the universe, you're putting it out there to God, and it's going to come back to you in the form of the other person doing what you want in that way, or being opened. It's an opening. Because at the same time you're doing it, you're opening your heart and you're doing that little dance that you did with the person that you described being stunned by what they said. It's the exact same thing that you're doing. You're opening your own sense of empathy into what he's experiencing. And then before you know it, he's asking you, can I see that? Let's share it. Teach me how.
Yeah. It was a miracle. It was
beautiful.
Such a miracle. And then we marveled. He would say, do you know how it was in my family when somebody got their feelings hurt? They said, you want to cry? I'll give you something to cry about. And that's what he heard growing up, different variations of that, because they just were so stressed and they had never learned those tools. And so it is fascinating. And the other thing that's interesting about it is that I was practicing self-love for myself in that moment, because I was saying basically to myself the things that I wished I had heard. And that helped me to de-escalate. And then, like you said, my heart was more open because I received love by writing the letter to myself.
That's right. That's right. Oh my gosh. If nothing else, the big message here in this whole conversation has been that say to yourself what you wish others would say to you. And then you open up an entire world of miracles to come into your world.
Yes, that is exactly what has happened in my life. I could tell you so many miracles because of that process. And I feel like for me, that was divine, that was revealed to me. I don't feel like it was just because I read a book or whatever, because many times I read books and the thing doesn't stick and I can't remember it. All the university classes that I took, I just couldn't remember everything. But when I read something that is so meaningful to me and is applicable, and the light bulb goes off, it's like the words glow on the page. Mm-hmm. And so I'm a visual learner. And I almost feel it viscerally. It just like absorbs and it is so important to me. And I feel like that's the spirit revealing that to me. This is for you. And I even hear that sometimes. This is for you. You need to do this. And so it's only by the grace of God that I've learned any of these things to teach anybody. It's not because of me.
Yeah. It's such a beautiful process. And it's really wonderful to see how that comes through you so authentically. And so thank you for articulating everything and sharing so many great things with us. Can you just finish out by letting us know what are the biggest lessons that you've learned in your life?
I have so many lessons.
You had to pick like
the top couple. So one of the most important things that I'm probably going to get all emotional again, but when I get in those difficult situations and I can't figure it out and I'm just so baffled, one of my mantras is, what would love do? And when I think of an ideal, perfect person like the Savior, what if he was here right now? What would he do with this person? When people put those little wristbands on, WWJD kind of thing. And I remember pondering that. But when I really used my imagination and I imagined he was right there, what would he do? How would he look at this person? And I ask, I pray and I ask, please help me see this person the way you do. I act differently. My energy is so different. I don't even have to say anything. Sometimes things happen and people are far away and I can't interact with them. But even my energy changes and my love for them is deeper and it's less about me and it's more about them. And so but I first have to have self-love before I can do that. But when I de-escalate enough to where I can remember that mantra, that changes my whole experience with that person. And relationships have been healed because I was given that awareness and that divine mantra to even ask that question of myself. And then to be able to use my imagination to think, what would love do? And the interesting thing is that, so I was certified as a spiritual life coach under Marianne Williamson. And she says that you can either have a grievance or you can have love. Which do you want? And then she says that we need to ask ourselves, are you willing to look at it differently? Now, in the beginning, when my emotions are escalated, I'm not, because I think my perspective is the only perspective. Even though I'm asking what happened here, I still think that my perspective is the perspective because I don't have any knowledge yet of what's going on over there. But when I'm ready and I can say, and sometimes I'm not, sometimes I'm mad. Mm-hmm. I've been wronged. But when I do the self-love and I even do what would love do for myself and I de-escalate, and then I say, I do want to look at it differently. That's when the miracle happens. That's what I call it. I described it as magic, but that's really the miracle that then I can have empathy for them. I think it's a miracle to even have empathy for someone else when you're hurting. I think that is such a divine miracle. And so those questions are very powerful for me. Are you willing to look at this differently? And I ask myself that when I'm feeling stuck and de-escalated a little bit. And then I ask myself, what would love do? And that's when those miracles happen.
Wow, that is beautiful. What about your blessings? What are you the most grateful for?
We talked about sensitivity. I am so grateful for my sensitivity now. For many years, I've been grateful, but I'm so grateful because I've had many people say that they wish that they could feel what the other person was feeling, that they wish that they could have the awareness, that they could even remember a mantra. They're like, I wish I could remember a mantra when I'm escalated. And I'm so grateful because like when I read the book and that thing became like glowing and I felt it in my soul. I used to write on little index cards, these little messages that I would feel from the book, or I'd hear something that somebody said or whatever. That's truth for me. I'm so grateful that I have that awareness to pay attention to that and then to remember. I don't always remember when I'm escalated, but I remember after. And I go and now I have it on my phone, but I used to carry around this stack of index cards and I had them in my nightstand and I had them in my purse and I read my little mantras, what I was supposed to do. And I'm so thankful because if I wasn't sensitive and things didn't bother me, and I know people like that, things just don't affect them and they're not even aware that they just stepped on somebody's toes and they are charging like a bull in a china shop and they don't even know what's happening. And then they wonder, why are people alienated from me? And it's because they have these blind spots. Oh, I've had blind spots too. So I know how that is. But I'm so grateful for that awareness that comes so that I can work on myself because I have so many things that I need to work on myself. A lot of times people say, what about that thing and that other thing? And I'm like, yeah, what about me? Am I doing the loving thing? Am I doing what love would do? Not always. And so I have plenty to focus on in my own life. And when I'm in a situation, and it's a very difficult situation, and I've been in those kinds of situations with family members, and it seems sometimes there's been estrangement when different things. And I can't do anything I don't have control over anything that's going on over on that side. I only have control over here, what's going on here. So I think, what can I do to be loving? And I'm grateful that those words even come to my mind. I can't even tell you how, that's one of the things I'm most grateful for that blessing in my life to remember. I celebrate every time I remember. I'm like, thank you, Lord. Thank you that I remembered that. Thank you for helping me remember that, because my brain forgets so easily. Even the things that I'm telling you, I forget so easily.
No, it's the truth that this is a lifelong process. Nobody has it all figured out. There's nobody who's really, truly, completely self-actualized. It's ongoing. It's this work. And so it's beautiful that you have been put here with this mission to help us with this and to facilitate this, because we need people like you. You're such a light in the world. Thank you for being here and sharing all of this. Honestly, I'm going to have to listen to this 3 or 4 times, because this is one you want to take notes for sure.
Oh,
Thank you, Karen. It's been wonderful talking with you.
Thank you. I love your good heart, because your heart has touched mine, and you bring out so much. And one of the things that's so wonderful about you is you love so naturally, and you create a safe space. I feel so safe telling you all these things and being vulnerable, because I feel your love. And that's a wonderful gift that you give to people. So thank you for giving that gift to me today. And I just want to send lots of love to your audience and let them know that they are so blessed to have you.
Wow. It's a love fest. Thank you. Everyone listening is going to feel this so strongly. It's so uplifting and empowering. I love it. Thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you, Mitzi.